My background is in technology as CTO and COO of various different companies and different industries. But in Microsoft, it's really about helping your business, and in this case, manufacturing in particular, to make the most of the technology and do more. But in a digital world, it's all about data, and it's all about how do you take what you have in your existing environment and go on the journey in a repeatable fashion, as we'll see as I go through the presentation. So I'm part of Microsoft's digital advisory services, which is not part of the main Microsoft that you may be aware of, Microsoft Office and Microsoft Azure and so on. I'm part of the Microsoft Consulting Services. And so that's who we are, but what we're trying to do then in the digital world is give you a repeatable, structured method for achieving digital change in your organization. So that's the how. The why and the what is up to you, and that's really the key thing. The one point of this presentation is that you are effectively given permission to imagine a new kind of business for yourselves. But as you know, imagination is one thing, actually turning it into reality is another. So this is this is the how of how we actually do this for thousands of companies all over the world. There are about 500 people like me around the world in Microsoft, so not all working in manufacturing, admittedly, but we take the lessons, we share the lessons between customers all over the world, and I would like to share some of those insights with you here today. So for transformation in manufacturing itself, from Microsoft's perspective, it's all about your customers, the employees that you have, the operational costs that you have, and ultimately completely new products that you can come up with, completely new areas of business that you hadn't considered before. And that's really where your imagination comes into play. And of course, it's about the revenue increase that those new products will bring to market for you. So if we expand that a little bit, digital is really all about data, and to allow you to rethink the way that you're going to use that data to drive a new business outcome. You can reinvent your processes, whether it's the human-machine interaction or delivering products in a pallet of one, rather than a minimum pallet of 50 or 100 or whatever it happens to be. You can have a far more customized environment. And lastly, then your supply chain itself can attain the highest level of supply chain capability and be a cognitive supply chain. I'll explain a little bit more about what that means as we go forward. But at the end of the day, it's about transforming your business and moving from a manufacturing business into a service business. And that may seem counterintuitive, but it is possible. It has been done by some of the largest elevator manufacturing companies in the world, for example. They no longer sell elevators, lifts. They sell lifts as a service, and they retain ownership of those lifts. The building property owners no longer need to put up the capital expenditure ahead of time to fund these very large pieces of equipment. And the same can be said of manufacturing equipment across the world in any of the manufacturing industries out there. And of course, it wouldn't be possible if we didn't have a platform to sit it all on. I'm not really going to go into a huge amount of detail about the technology platform that Microsoft provide in the cloud, in Microsoft Azure, other than to say it is secure, which is probably one of the biggest concerns that you have. In my experience in changing technology and changing businesses, you slowly but surely adopt new ideas, but as they scale and go out into the rest of the world, you need to make sure they are secure. And that's something that Microsoft has very much focused on in bringing digital transformation and the platform to the manufacturing industry. Whether it's Internet of Things or artificial intelligence or visual cognitive artificial intelligence, we'll see some examples of that as we go forward. And of course, privacy and transparency are covered as well. So these are some of from Microsoft's point of view, these are some of the digital hotspots in manufacturing. These are the areas where we're getting the most involvement from our customers in design, production, service, and ultimately transformation and extending not just the supply chain but the value chain of your business. And it may be a surprise to you, but Microsoft is actually extremely involved in the manufacturing industry as a whole. This is just a sample of some of the companies that we've helped, not just in writing their Word documents and their PowerPoint presentations, but in actually bringing together the data and allowing them to transform their businesses digitally and produce new revenues, new areas of business that they hadn't previously considered. And that's something we'd like to see you all here doing, and working with Microsoft and working with our partners to produce a whole new stream of business and drive growth in manufacturing in Ireland and around the world. Sorry, so, and this is again a little bit more on some of the partners, the names that you may see that are actively working in manufacturing already and have been doing so for a number of years with Microsoft, using the Microsoft platform to deliver value, ultimately new value in the manufacturing enterprises that we know out there. So how did this come about? Well, it may be a surprise to some of you, but Microsoft has a supply chain of its own. It is actually a manufacturing business. It's very easy to think of Microsoft in terms of Office and so on, but in actual fact we produce our own hardware products, our own laptops, our own HoloLens devices, and we're continuously improving that and trying to make it as efficient as possible. So there were a lot of pressures on that supply chain that we had to try and address. So within manufacturing then, there are three levels of transformation. There's the first stage where you simply get your devices connected, and you may already be at that stage in a lot of organizations are pretty have managed to connect things together, but maybe it's not being collected in the same way or not being collected in a standard way around the business globally. So once you've got things connected and you're starting to collect data, then you can start to predict things, and it does actually have a noticeable business value, a business value associated with being predictive. But ultimately, you want to become cognitive, where your supply chain is fully connected and you're making use of all those great new technologies like blockchain and IoT. But we'll come to those, and those in themselves produce new revenue opportunities for your businesses. So this then is sort of a summary of Microsoft's approach to manufacturing, and it's I'm conscious that we're not just talking about process manufacturing. There are a number of other areas and supporting industries in energy and agriculture, and of course pharmaceuticals in the process manufacturing world as well. It's not just discrete manufacturing. So we talked about product as a service. What we haven't touched on so far is the factory of the future, and that's something that Microsoft is very much invested in, and we've touched on the intelligent supply chain already. The way we are able to facilitate that is with some of these solutions here along the bottom. An interesting one, a point of note here, is that we are also focusing on training and learning and health and safety in the manufacturing environment. So we're not just focused on new revenue, but if we bring in a new technology, we want to make sure that people know how to use it properly. And I'll also highlight then the Azure Digital Twin, which is a new capability where you can effectively take your entire manufacturing process and plant, and if you like, it's a simple way of thinking about it as a spreadsheet for your manufacturing business. So you can start to see, what if you add a new factory? What if you add a new way of doing business? What if you add a new supplier? What sort of change is that going to have in your business? And that's where the idea of digital twin comes into play. So really what I'm trying to do is give you some ideas to help you start imagining at this point, which is great. But the real point of the talk is, what do you actually do about it once you have all these ideas? How do you actually capture things and maintain the momentum and ensure that it's a repeatable process? So we'd love to see more businesses applying artificial intelligence in the factory of the future, and there are lots and lots of ways of doing that, which I'm not going to try and get into everyone. There's a huge amount of depth in all of this, so I'd love to have follow-up conversations if any of this is sparking an interest with you. I'm on LinkedIn and Twitter and so on, so do feel free to reach out to me to talk about some of these things. And it's worth saying, we talk about artificial intelligence, but really it's augmented intelligence. So we're augmenting the processes that we already have to make them more intelligent, and that's an important distinction, I think. So I've talked about digital twins. I'll leave that slide for later. So it's certainly true to say, whether you're at home or at work, the digital era is definitely here. There's lots of devices and lots of information being collected. But again, what do you actually do with it? The great thing is it's all gotten a lot less expensive. So that's why we're seeing such a huge uptick in activity across all sorts of industries, but not least manufacturing. Things are a fraction of the cost that they were 10 years ago. So there's a huge amount of opportunity out there in the democratization of technology in this space. And of course, if you move quickly, if you work to really transform your business, you don't simply replace digital processes or bring into play efficiencies. Then you get the bigger growth, the bigger wins, the long-term capability and the long-term opportunity for your business and the impact. And of course, if you look to actually master the process, then again, you'll see the biggest returns in revenue and profitability and market value. But as I said, how do you actually do that? How do you go from one change, one project to something that's continuous? How do you? And it's funny, I guess. The manufacturing industry is all about repeatable production. So this should be second nature, really. But many businesses haven't had that kind of capability in the past. So for us, it's about the digital approach, that I'll go into now in a little bit more detail. The digital platform in the cloud with Internet of Things and all of the services that you can avail of there. But also, let's not forget about the people and the digital culture. You have to bring your teams of people. You have to make it a team sport, if you like. And we have a Microsoft Technology Center here in Dublin, in our offices in Dublin, where we've had a number of different manufacturing organizations in to effectively go through business ideas and try and figure out what are the blockers and what are the next steps and what are we going to do about it. But the important thing then is that you capture all of that information, and then that everybody understands how you go around this loop. And I apologize this use of the term dream, design, deliver. You might not all be dreamers, but you are visionaries. You do have a vision of what your business is like. So you don't necessarily have to think of it as dreaming, but once you've put together your vision, then you want to design it with the right team and the right people and ultimately deliver it. But it should be something you do on a quarterly basis. You should be able to go through this loop every 6 months. It shouldn't be something that you start and then 3 years later you go back to. It's a much more agile environment that we're dealing with these days. And these are just some of the key thoughts for digital culture in Microsoft, not least the growth mindset, which is not getting stuck in the ideas of the past, allowing for complete change of your business. And we tend to underestimate the amount of change that we'll see in 2 years, but overestimate the amount of change that we see in 2 years, but underestimate the amount of change we see in 5 to 10 years. And that's all brought about by the growth mindset and the digital culture. I've talked about the platform that we have at the moment, and this year Microsoft has gone from using the cloud with our customers and the intelligent edge and the Internet of Things to infusing that with artificial intelligence. So there's a huge push on to take all of this data that you have in the manufacturing industry and use it with artificial intelligence. So this is sort of a summary of our dream, design, deliver approach. So these are then, within the dream phase, these are the key components of a dream, of the book of dreams that we put together. It's the trends and insights that are some of the things I've talked about already. It's the digital journey map, and ultimately leads to a roadmap with representation of what the solution should look like, what the narrative is, how you're going to actually communicate this to your board and to your management team and so on. So looking at trends, it's all about what does your trend radar look like. Blockchain obviously is a huge trend at the moment, and I'm sure you'll hear there's lots more going on, other people speaking about. But in terms of manufacturing, it's all about the smart contract and being able to react to change. And blockchain, from Microsoft's point of view, is being used across all industries, not just manufacturing. But today we're focused on manufacturing and how blockchain could possibly be used in asset tracking and auction and real-time pricing of commodities and so on and so forth. But ultimately it's about how is a competitor going to get there before you? Or alternatively, how are you going to get there before a competitor? So in terms of first steps, things to actually do here, you can use the data you already have to increase your service levels and decrease your costs across the whole supply chain. And then you can look to add in additional data to enhance your inventory optimization, for example. This is what Microsoft do on a daily basis. This is the dashboard that we actually have for all of our supply chain, for all of those tens of thousands of parts that go into all of Microsoft's products. So we can see where the ships are delivering different products and where weather is impacting the supply chain. And this is something we can build for your organizations. Because we've done it before, we can do it again. We have the technology and the insight. Similarly, for combining IoT and blockchain into the supply chain, this is an example of the various points along the journey. And I have to apologize, I know I'm presenting you with a huge amount of information, but it's such an interesting topic. There's so much to cover in it. And it really is about understanding the journey from your customer's point of view. What are the things that they're finding hard to do from the point of view of the buyers and sellers on your side and the customers themselves? So how can you take your competitor's environment and rather than have them disrupt you and win, why don't you disrupt them and win? So start imagining. We have something called a digital studio, which is basically digital transformation studio, which is a web application that allows all of our customers to capture their ideas and collaborate with us, but with really anybody, and then simply produce standardized PowerPoint presentations and documents that you can share to really help communicate your ideas to the board and to your customers, to make sure that everybody's on the same page and understands how you're going to deliver your digital transformation. So a great idea would be, how can you achieve 50% revenue increase by 2025 from new revenue sources? Start thinking about that. Start thinking about how you're going to achieve that sort of goal. Microsoft has delivered this for hundreds of organizations around the world, so we can do the same for you. But if you've got all these great ideas, how are you actually going to prioritize it? Well, you need to decide whether things are aspirational or experimental or simply below the line, incremental and evolutionary, where things are a little less interesting, I think. And the Book of Dreams ultimately captures the trends and insights that you want to focus on, the vision that you have, and more importantly, the prioritization around your digital transformation. So you can't transform without deciding what the top three things are for this quarter or this half year or this year, and then repeat the process. Get those out of the way, get those delivered, and then move on. So I think I've probably run out of time at this stage, so I can, no, got another few minutes, great, okay. I'll carry on. So this is, again, in summary, the digital approach. We've looked at dreaming. If we look at designing then, so the design is very much about putting together your digital transformation team. Who are the people best positioned to drive your digital transformation? Are they data scientists? Are they experts on the factory floor? You do have to include everybody. It's not just about the IT team. And it is about determining what is the business value. But something I haven't talked about so far in all of this is this idea of digital maturity. So how mature is your organization? Do you have the expertise that you need? If you do, that's great, but do you need additional partners? Do you want assistance from Microsoft? What's the best way to move forward? So we've seen, again, with a number of these different Irish organizations that have been into us to talk about transformation manufacturing, the first thing is to establish what what are the standard data types, data terms? What data are you actually collecting across your organization? And is it the same in every factory? Is it the same for every product line? Does it make sense holistically across your organization to talk about the number of units produced? Is it in an hour? Is it per day? Is it per week? Or you'll find that different organizations, even different factories within the same organization, have different ways of thinking about the data that they're collecting. So that's an important first step, is to get agreement across the organization about what your data actually means to your organization. Then you can look to start to out into the community, as you're doing here today, to explore what other people are doing with their data. And then you can start to look at, well, what's the first thing, the first three things, the top three things that we want to do with our data in 2019. But the team, as I said, is a combination of Microsoft, your customers, and your own teams together with partners. But then how do you test those ideas? You need a good way to communicate the ideas to third parties, to interested parties. You need to market test these things, and that's probably something you're doing already in the commercial space, but it's just as important when you're transforming your business as well. And as I've showed you earlier, determining the value of your scenarios versus the scenarios themselves, and the size of the opportunity can be quite simply communicated in a chart like this one. We can provide you with a digital maturity assessment, and that again is a very useful way for explaining to your management team that you actually need more people or more experts or more training. And on the topic of training, we talked earlier about health and safety. We found that the process of adoption of change is underestimated in most organizations. So it's important that you don't just train your employees, but you train their managers as well. Employees aren't going to follow through on a particular digital change if their managers don't understand what a new process it is that they're providing and how to support them in all of that. So moving quickly along, that's a summary then of the stages of the design phase, and then you'll be glad to know we're moving into the deliver phase, where we look at some agile software development, agile development, adoption and change management, the process of communicating the ideas and determining how well you're doing in delivering the change, not just to your organization, but also to your customers. We do a lot of customer market research, but maybe not as much with our own internal teams. And that helps to bring everybody on the journey and make sure everybody's included. And it's not something that a highfalutin idea that management have come up with and you don't have buy-in across the organization. Try to make people fans. I know this is a Real Madrid, La Liga example, but think of your employees and your customers as fans of your business. If you think of it in that way, maybe unusual to think of it that way in manufacturing, but it does help you think about your business and the business value and where you're going in a slightly different way. And again, imagine this is an example with Maersk, where the entire supply chain was moved into the cloud within a few months, and the supply chain was fully notarized, if you like, by blockchain and IoT. But that data then became monetized for the organization. And this is just, in closing, an example of some of the different companies. I think we'll be sharing the slides later, so you'll be able to look at these in more detail. But this is a little bit more. Every single one of these companies was digitally transformed in partnership with Microsoft, using the process, the dream, design, deliver, the definition, capturing, the sharing, the collaboration, and that's basically how we do it. Thank you very much.